everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Black-Liberation.Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Renée Jordan. Here are some questions that you might have, and I want to take a moment to answer them. So, how do I tell the difference between fear and a real signal to pivot? Okay, so I'll give an example. I completed my comprehensive exams and I was working on my prospectus, so my dissertation proposal, telling my committee what I wanted to do for my final research project. And in the midst of that, the COVID-19 pandemic happened and we were no longer in person. Things were happening virtually. And while people were still creating after school programs, I decided for myself that I needed to pivot. One, because time was of the essence. I had 7 years to complete my PhD. And by the time I was getting my prospectus together, time was ticking and I had to get the things done. So I was not afraid that I would not be able to finish because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I knew that I had to do something different, and that required me to pivot. And I decided that I needed to pivot because it was going to allow me to have a more comfortable experience. So, yes, I could have done an after school program and it could have been online, but I also was aware of what was happening with students online and needed to assess if that's what would be comfortable and expedient to me. Meaning, would I be able to get done quickly? And so I said, you know what? This is not going to work for me. I need to pivot. I need to change. Instead of trying to put together an after school program, I switched the grades, or I switched ages, and I went from middle school and high school students to adults. I figured that it would be less of an issue, less of a problem, less burdensome to ask adults if they wouldn't mind interviewing with me for half an hour to 60 minutes so that I could learn from them how they learned technology and demonstrated their digital literacies. And as a result of that pivot, I was able to move quickly. I was still able to move in the direction that I wanted to go. I was still working with members who belonged to the target audiences in which I wanted to engage. So Latinas, Afro-Latinas, and Black women. And as a result, I was able to get retroactive data, if you will, about how they went about learning technologies and demonstrating their digital literacies so that I could answer research questions that would still allow me to design an after-school program. And for those of you who didn't know, Black-Liberation.Tech is my open educational resource that I said that I would create as a result of my dissertation. So this is the pivot. What you're looking at is the pivot. This is my after school program. This is me working with people outside of regular classroom hours in order to help them along their way, whether that is with AI literacy or academic and career coaching. And so I hope that you find this helpful. And I hope that encourages you to pivot. So if you run into something and things are not going to work out the way you expected, I want to encourage you to take a breath, reassess the evaluation, and see if there's another path that you can turn into that will allow you to obtain and reach your goals in a different way. All right. So let's take a look at the next question. What skills matter before I know my final career destination? Okay. What skills matter? I will say, first and foremost, your people skills. Your people skills in being able to work with people, being able to network with people, being able to communicate with people what you need, being able to communicate with people what you require of them or need them to do for you, being able to communicate with people in terms of giving them information that will help them along their way. Let's say you work in a place and they need you in terms of completing a bigger project or a bigger process. You being able to communicate that information to the next person is very important. Skills in terms of reading comprehension, you will never escape, whether it's in school or working. Reading comprehension is essential. When you read something, can you remember it? When you read something, are you seeing what's being asked of you? Are you able to follow the instructions? Are you able to follow the logic? Are you able to create something new and innovative as a result of reading many different things? And I would have to say some other skills that are very important would be AI literacy, digital literacies, being able to think critically. I know that's like a cliche, critical thinking, but being able to take in information and make decisions on that information after doing an internal evaluation. Perhaps you write it out in terms of what are options, what is the most important information, how can you prioritize your next steps based on the information that you received, or prioritize the actual problem versus what is the condition, and meaning, is it an actual issue, or is this just the environment in which something is taking place? So being able to think critically, being able to make connections between different scenarios and even different disciplines, that is something that is a very good skill to have so that you can help navigate new instances or occurrences or experiences based on what you have seen or experienced before. So those skills are very, very important. And I would want to encourage you to take a look at the Black-Liberation.Tech open educational resource and the different lessons that are there in order to see how you can sharpen those skills based on your interests. And so, once again, it's an open educational resource. You get to insert where there are brackets or make edits and adjustments so that it's tailored for you and you don't have to follow my examples exactly. You can modify them for yourself. Okay, so I would say those are important skills. Now, the part where it says, what skills matter before I know my final career destination? You need to get all the information you can from every opportunity. And when I say that, it's not just what you do, but take a look at the next person. See if they have skills that are of value that you can adopt and hone for yourself. And it might not be that the next person is in the job that you want, but you notice, oh, this person is really good at X, Y, and Z. This person is really good when it comes to presenting information. How can I get in front of more people or practice presenting information? And that information that they present might be in one discipline, but the information that you learn to or along your way present changes, the skill of being able to present information is still very valuable. And so if you see a skill, if you see a capability in someone else, and you say, you know what, they do that really well. How can I sharpen my ability to do that and start putting yourself in places to demonstrate that to others, as well as practice on your own? Then those are the types of skills that you should take on even before you know your final destination, because everything works together. So whether you end up presenting to your team or presenting to a colleague, perhaps you have to train someone, perhaps you have to present to an entire company. Taking the time to practice presenting, taking the time on being able to write reports that are concise, as well as reports that might be at length in order to explain things in great detail. Those are things or skills that are important to know in many different disciplines. And being able to present information in different formats is also very good. So whether it's in writing, whether it's visually, whether it's an oral presentation, and you don't have any props with you, it's just you talking, then those are skills that you can practice before you get there. And I guarantee once you get to your final career destination, those will be helpful. Skills are like tools. And so the more tools you have available to you that you've practiced with and that you've honed and that you've sharpened, then the better off you're going to be wherever you land. All right, the next question. How do I make choices when I don't want to disappoint my family or myself? Well, there's a couple ways to do this. You can either explain yourself, or you can let them know you're planning to do something, or you can wait until after you're done with it and let them know. I understood that whatever decisions or choices I made as it related to my career journey and education, that it would be my responsibility to get it funded. So whether that was obtain scholarships, get grants, or submit applications for loans to get it done, I knew it was my responsibility. And as a result, that allowed me the liberty to explore freely because my parents weren't going to tell me no because they weren't the ones paying for it. And they wanted me to go as far as I could go in my education and understood that it would be up to me to do that and to see it through. So that was my experience. Now, you can also give people the cliff notes and say the high points. And perhaps, let's say they wanted you to become a doctor, a medical doctor, an engineer, a dentist, or a lawyer. And you may want to let them know that, you know what, I found this to be not aligned with who I am as an individual. And instead of working in a field that I'm not interested in, even though I have the skills and the talent and the ability, because some people, they don't go off to become lawyers and doctors, not because they can't, because they really can. They have the grades, they have the test scores and everything. They decide for themselves that they want to do something else. That's okay. It's okay. You can give them the cliff notes and say, hey, I've decided that that's not going to work for me. And so this is what I want to do instead. So my advice would be to let them know that, hey, I understand that you all wanted me to do X, Y, and Z, but this is what I want to do instead. So instead of just saying, I don't want to do it, and then not have a plan to share with them, I would recommend saying, hey, this is something that's not of interest to me. This is what I'm interested in, and here's how I plan to get there. And so I hope that helps you navigate that conversation. Now, I do know someone who did not tell folks that she was even applying to medical school until she had already taken the test, submitted her application, and the next thing they know, she was packing up to leave to go to medical school. Why? Because she didn't want people up in her face asking her, did you get the score back? Did you get your score back? Did you get in? Did you get in? And so instead of leaving room for them to be disappointed, they found out after the fact. She was on her way to medical school. She did the thing. And so that's another way to make your choice without disappointing, because if they don't know, they can't be disappointed. So there's different ways of getting around it. I shared mine, I shared a middle ground, and I shared one of my friends. And so think about how you can navigate that for yourself. It also might mean being independent before you can go off and do that journey. What do I mean by that? You might have to move out and be able to sustain yourself and figure out how to get it done on your own. And that could be something that's tight, that's something that you might not be able to manage, or perhaps you could ask your family for time. But if it's going to disappoint them to the point where they're like, well, you live in my house and my rules, then you might have to get your own house where you set your own rules. And hopefully they'll be proud that you're making it on your own. So think about it, talk about it with the person who cares about you the most, who listens to you and does not just dictate things to you, whoever that might be. And perhaps ask them, I know I'm going to disappoint some family members. How do you recommend I go about this? Here are some options. I can do it because I'm going to take care of it myself and they don't have to worry about it. I can say, hey, I'm not interested in this path, but here's my plan for this other path. Or I can see about getting accepted into the programs or getting a position in the field that I'm interested in and letting them know after the fact. What are some other ways that I can go about this conversation so that I can move forward in a direction that works well for me at this point in time? It's not to say that I won't change my mind, because I might find out that I want to do something else after having a chance. But from this point, how can I move forward? All right. Now, next question. What if I'm interested in too many things and I can't choose just one? Well, I would recommend going to the Black-Liberation.Tech open educational resource and seeing what's out there. Then working with either a search engine or generative AI and saying, hey, I have this many different interests. These are the skills, knowledge, and education that I do have. Which one am I most aligned with? What would I have to do to get to each one of these different pathways based on what I have? Do a search and find people who are in those fields, follow them, listen to them tell their story and how they made their decisions and different experiences that they had along the way. So learn from others. Talk to people, do an informational interview. So find somebody on LinkedIn, say, hey, can I do an informational interview with you? Maybe 15 to 20 minutes of your time. And during that interview, it's a reverse interview. You're asking them the questions. You ask them about their journey and find out how they were able to make decisions along their way. And if they had to disappoint some family members with their decisions, how did they navigate that? And see from those engagements if there's something that clicks more than others. See if there are any entry level positions that will get you exposure to the field that you're interested in. Maybe it's not the job that you'll actually end up doing in the long run, but are you able to get into, like I said, I was an executive assistant. I was an executive assistant at a university that had a medical school. I was able to look and see how doctors were operating in terms of research, and I got a glimpse at a cadaver that changed my life. Okay, it was under a sheet. Go back to season 1, episode 1 for the full story. But that allowed me to get a closer view that I would not get just by looking at someone online. I was able to see some of their day-to-day activities. And as a result, I was able to make decisions, informed decisions for myself. The same thing with the temp agency. I was an administrative assistant, an office manager. I was at the front desk, a receptionist, a concierge. And so I was able to see how these people moved in the different meetings they needed help setting up, as well as the different tasks that I had to help them with in order to accomplish their projects and goals and things of that nature. And that preview allowed me to assess and evaluate for myself, what did I like? And I found that I liked the education atmosphere the most. I had the chance to work in school settings in the front office in that temp agency. And I also had the opportunity to work with a day center for those who had special needs. And I did like the education field there as well. And I said, you know what? This education thing is sitting and resonating with me more so than the law office where I was at the front desk in terms of what the environment felt like. Because that could be an important factor for some people. Some people, they're just like, as long as I show up and I do what I need to do and I can go home with my money, then that's fine. More power to you. But I want to know what it feels like. And education gave me the feel, the vibe, if you will, that went well with me. Okay, so the last question that I'm going to take a look at, how do I trust myself when the next step isn't obvious? That's okay. Know that you don't have to have it all figured out all at once. Know that there's more than one option, more than one opportunity, more than one chance. There are different ways to taking advantage of opportunities. Some people, they go through one career trajectory and decide that they want to change after years of being in it. When I would watch something on TV that dealt with like life in the ER or something, there was someone who was a truck driver who later on decided he wanted to go to medical school, and he did. So I say that to say there are different ways to go from one point to the next that look nothing alike and from the outside. But it's possible to make a change when you're ready and know that when you make that change, whatever it looks like, it's okay. And hopefully you find something that works well for you based on what you prioritize, based on your interests, based on your goals, based on your evolved or new interests and new goals. Maybe it's a shift from one thing to another, once again, that don't look similar. And so while I have different degrees, when I tell my story, it makes sense. And so just know that your journey will make sense to you. And it might be that you went in one direction and said, hey, I'm going to push, pause, halt, stop. I need to do something else. It's not that you're starting over because you have all of that experience that led you to that point. It doesn't get erased. No one's going to take that from you. You'll be able to apply it in other places. It's just that now you need to make a turn and go in another direction, and that's okay. So trust yourself in terms of thinking about times of when you've made decisions in the past and the positive outcomes. And even when you've made decisions in the past and they weren't positive outcomes, how did you know? At what point did you know it wasn't a good thing? That's valuable information too. Sometimes it takes getting into something and saying, ooh, this is not going to work. I need to stop. I need to stop right here and make a change and turn, as opposed to walking off and continuing in a direction that's not working for you. Okay, so that is that. Now, I do want to emphasize a couple of things that I have written down so that I know I don't miss it. Okay, I did it because I can doesn't mean I knew everything. It means I trusted my ability to learn, adapt, and respond to information as it showed up. All right, another point that I wanted to make sure I stated clearly, I did it because I can is also about using your voice, asking questions, naming confusion, and refusing to stay silent just to look prepared. So if you're bumping up against something and you don't understand it, whether you're in class or at work, ask the questions. Do the Google searches. Find someone that you can talk to. Perhaps it's someone who is a peer at another company. How do you handle X, Y, and Z? Perhaps it's a peer in another discipline. So let's say I was in instructional technology, but someone that I attended their prospectus, their dissertation proposal, was in music education. I could ask them, hey, how did you decide to use daughtering for your qualitative research? Ask somebody else and get help there. And don't settle by being silent. With all of that being said, I want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Black-Liberation.Tech Podcast. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and share, rate, and review the podcast to help it become more discoverable. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.